This is one of the iconic places here in Burnley, or here one of the iconic places in Lancashire. So come along with me, it's Girl on the Move. See the world through my lenses. Today we are at the Queen Street Cotton Mill, which is a textile mill producing textile. The textile mill at Queen Street here in Briarcliff, a suburb of Burnley. It's a working mill. They produce calico. Most of the material, or most of their cotton, used to come from America and some Egypt and various other places like Asia, India. It's very rough cotton. It's used in like making tea towels and various other things. They're doing some experiments in there to be able to produce other things more colorful, because their color there is just like a beigey color with green, red and blue, and that's about it. And now I think they're experimenting with colors to see what else they can produce, especially now that the twin boilers, which we saw earlier on, the red boilers, underground, they're now been passed to start operating again. So they're hoping to be more adventurous and to produce more different colors.
Those two big silver rollers are hollow and full of hot steam, and they dry out the thread as it goes over it. And the threads come out the other end much stronger, strong enough to be able to go onto the looms, and they come out at the end here.
If there's something making a noise, it doesn't probably make a noise.
So the threads come through and onto this beam here, and they're now treated. So you've got 2,500 of them going onto what is then called a weaver's beam, and that beam has then got the threads all on it, all treated and processed, ready to go onto the looms. As the threads come through, you see there's a little hammer here. And every 100 yards of thread that goes through, that comes down and leaves a dye mark on the cotton. And that is so when the weaver is working their loom, when they see that come through, they know that's a piece. So they're paid on piece rate, and piece rate comes from weaving. So a piece of cotton is what they're paid on. It's where you also get piece haul in Halifax. It's the same, it's not War and Peace, it's spelled piece, as in that's where they used to trade cotton. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that 100 yards of cotton. They can then put it off, send it to the warehouse to be checked, and however much they do a day, that's what they get paid on. So that's the warp thread. So you've now got the warp threads on the beam, ready to go to the loom. The wet threads, which are what goes in the shuffle, have to be processed. Come down here, I'll show you what we do with the wet threads. They're made locally, so it was a huge industry. There were 89 tanneries in the town making all the leather goods. There's a lot of leather on the looms, the belts that drive them, they're leather. So there was a huge industry supplying the weaving sheds. I think the statistic, we had a bit of a training course before the season this year. It was a great statistic. Lancashire, back in the peak, which is about 1913, produced enough cotton in a year to go to the moon and back 10 times. 4.5 billion yards of cotton. So it was a lot. They used to say that Lancashire clothed Britain in the morning before breakfast and the rest of the world in the afternoon. And it's true. At the peak, Burnley produced more cotton than the rest of the world. But that peak was way before this mill even opened. The world share of cotton from Lancashire was dropping by about 1870 as the rest of the world started building their industry up. dispatch area where the in and out and going down. The horses and cart are taken down to the station. And this is a more modern loom, it doesn't work anymore. This is the old warehouse for the mill. We've got the looms in here because we can run them off this line shaft which is electric motor powered, whereas the main shed we have to have the engine running to run the looms in there. So this was the warehouse. The cloth would have been brought in here in the pieces and put onto these two folding machines that wrap them. Someone described it to me great the other day. They wrap them in a way a bit like a book. And this table is where they'd unfold them, so it had inspectors on here who could then go through the cotton, inspecting it for any faults. If there's any faults, you can send for the weaver, and from too many faults they'd be fined. Because the weaver's only paid by piece rate, and that's a piece of good cloth. If they got a piece of cloth that's a second or they can't sell, the weaver's not going to be paid for it. They know which loom it comes off, every piece of cloth that it's out with a loom number, so they know who.
This is calico material. This is calico.
The best estimate would be 6 looms, but they probably weren't all working at once because they run out of thread, there's repairs, we need what they call gating in when you change the beam at the back. So it's probable they were running 4 continuously and maybe 2 changing over. Still hard work though. What you've got around the edge are examples of lots of other looms. Peter's going to demonstrate the Lancashire looms that they used to use here, but you've also got examples. You can feel free after the tour, you can wander around and sort of have another look. We've got different examples of different looms. There's one over there that's Terry. So you could have up to about 16 of these, and later on if we've got people more technical, you might have 30, but they just should just run all day without stopping. It's getting on a bit though, isn't it? Yeah, it doesn't run all the way into either, but you don't like being stuck. Now we're going to look at the end, at the reading there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What hearing protection do you use? This is what hearing protection do you use? Do you use anything for your hearing?
Yeah, we do have some. It's these screens that block the sound.
Yeah.
You need to be exposed for, they say, over 10 minutes, and we never run for more than that.
Right, okay.
And I worked in engineering and boiler making and things like that, so it's a bit late for me, really.
Yeah, if mind you, if you still have a 50.
Scarf on the head, and you get the phrase letting your hair down, because at the end of the week you take the scarf off, let your hair down. can't have anything loose, no loose clothing, nothing that gets caught in here. Now, they did have children working in the mill. This mill opened after most of the children and Factories Acts had come in. And you didn't tend to get too many children working in weaving mills anyway. The stories you hear about children crawling under the machines, that's generally spinning mills. If you go to a spinning mill, you'll see the machines are high off the ground. The children used to crawl underneath. You crawl underneath here, you're dead instantly. This is all moving parts. You would have had teenagers working here as trainees, fetching and carrying and learning how to weave, but we didn't have children. The mill, as I talked about earlier, cotton doesn't like cold or dry. You're in Lancashire, so dry is not necessarily too much of a problem, but cold is. So you've got steam pipes. All these silver pipes are steam pipes, keeping the whole shed very, very hot. If it got too dry, they'd throw water on the floor, or you've got humidifiers putting moisture into the atmosphere just to keep it almost tropical conditions so the cotton doesn't break. They were working from 7 till 10 with a couple of breaks, a lunch break. You might go home, most of the weavers live locally, or you might bring some food in. There's a canteen in the corner where they could eat. 5 days a week, they didn't work 7 days and they didn't work 3 shifts here. It was just a 1-shift factory. For a time at the peak, they also rented space in Primrose Mill next door on what is called a power and space contract. So they provide the looms and they get space in another mill. So at its peak, Queen Street Mill Manufacturing Company was running up to 1,500 looms. But that peak didn't last very long. World War I came along, then World War II. There were a lot of peaks and troughs. Only lost money in 1 year, stayed open and worked continuously from 1895 to 1982, always producing the same material, which is calico, which is just the rough cotton, which was then sent off to be processed, dyed, turned into various bits and pieces. But it's pretty rough. It wasn't used for fine clothing or anything. There would have been 2 more banks of looms here as well. There wasn't just a big gap. This was put in when it was turned into a museum to create an access through. And everything runs off the line shaft behind you, which comes from that big flywheel. So that then drives the side shafts, which I recently discovered you should turn in the opposite direction. So they stay in balance. So each individual line shaft turns the opposite way, which is why some of the belts are straight and some of the belts are twisted. All the looms work the same way, but if the belts were all the same way, some of them would be trying to go backwards. It doesn't work. It's been used for filming in a few productions. Life on Mars, it was that series, there was one of the episodes filmed here. The King's Speech, at the beginning of the King's Speech, is making a speech in a mill, and that was filmed here as well. When we want it, we can run the front bank of looms, and we're trying to get these all running again. The problem we've got is these looms are predominantly made out of cast iron, which was sort of wonder material in the Industrial Revolution, but is very brittle. So when we move these looms, we've got to be very careful. If you drop one, it'll shatter. And getting them repaired is incredibly expensive and difficult. You also can't get new parts for them, as you can imagine. So the looms at the bottom end are being cannibalised.